The song starts with a vocal melody played through this plugin. This plugin takes the loudest frequency and dynamics of whatever sound comes into it and creates a square wave from it. After that, I come in with a function generator, which I play through this junky tape player. The function generator requires me to use these keys and this knob to plug in the correct frequency of whatever note I'm trying to hit. I couldn't possibly enter in the new frequencies fast enough, so I compressed that time using Logic Pro's flex time feature. Then, I pass the signal through this crappy tape player. I'd like to say I intentionally came up with the idea to misuse it, but actually it was just broken, and in trying to fix it as fast as possible, I ended up stumbling on this pretty cool phenomenon. The issue was I couldn't get it to record audio onto the tape, but I could get it to play it back. I thought it'd be a time sink to actually try to troubleshoot the circuit, and I just thought I might as well use my own amplifier to pump signal into the tape head. It turns out you can't just do that. You actually need to get a little fancy to properly record onto tape. The issue there is that the magnetic tape responds really nice and linearly to magnetic fields that are in this Goldilocks zone. If the magnetic field is too strong, you get tape distortion, which can sound really nice, but if we're trying to accurately record a sound, obviously distortion would screw that up. If the magnetic field is too small, the magnetic particles in the tape are stubborn and hardly put any effort into recording anything at all. All that to say, magnetic tape is really non-linear for quiet and loud sounds. The way engineers solved that issue is actually really clever. They just blasted a super loud ultrasonic frequency over the incoming audio. You would think that would do nothing or make your signal sound even worse, but as if by magic, it ends up coming out of your speaker cleaner. I'll explain. Imagine you have a quiet 3000 Hz signal you want to record onto your tape, which sounds like this. Let's say we're not using our super loud ultrasonic frequency and we're just pumping our signal into the tape head. The tape head turns your electrical signal into a magnetic signal as the magnetic tape runs across it. But remember, our signal is quiet and magnetic tape doesn't respond well to quiet signals. So when this signal comes in, let's say the magnetic tape just doesn't record anything between the red lines. Like, it's saying, "You're not loud enough, I'm not even going to bother with you." This is a little bit of an oversimplification, but it pretty much keeps true to the essential concept. So if the red lines are the threshold, which a signal must pass to be registered, our quiet signal doesn't make the cut and just doesn't get recorded. If it was louder, parts of it would be recorded, but it would get pretty mangled in the process. Now let's imagine we blast a loud ultrasonic frequency through our tape head along with our signal. It looks like a mess now, but you can sort of see our original signal making the tops of our ultrasonic frequency bob up and down. Now we still have to set everything between the red lines to 0, because our tape still doesn't respond well to small magnetic fields. But hey, look at this. Even though we don't record anything between the red lines, we can still see the top of our ultrasonic frequency bob up and down. That means our quiet 3000 Hz signal is still in there, whereas before it was completely obliterated. So the reason we use an ultrasonic frequency to do this job is so that we can filter them out and no one will care. You can't hear ultrasonic frequencies anyway. So after I filter out all the ultrasonic frequencies, check it out. I get my quiet 3000 Hz signal back. Sure, it's kind of messed up, but think of all the stuff he just went through. And you're kind of messed up, so who are you to judge? Anyway, when I ran my function generator through my tape player, I didn't do any of that fancy ultrasonic stuff, which is called an AC bias, by the way. So my signal was more like this one. See how it gets more distorted as it gets quieter until it just kind of cuts out? Now listen to my function generator and try to listen for that effect. It's kind of a cool effect. I just kind of wish I could say I did that intentionally. Okay, moving on. During this section, we also get to hear my C-board playing a sine wave through my interferometer. I have a video explaining how that works if you're interested. It's pretty cool. Then I bring in some acoustic guitar, which I play with a slide, which I'm hoping is reminiscent of the first song. It is thematically, anyway. This slide guitar is a simulation of what it would sound like to play in a 4-dimensional room on the moon and then send that signal back to Earth. You might have seen my video about simulating reverb from a 4D room, but I haven't made one about impulse responses yet. It's a pretty interesting topic, but it'll take too long to explain here. So, for those who already know about impulse responses, I'll just do a quick explanation. I clipped a small pop from the transmissions sent from the moon during the 1969 moon landing, and I used that as my impulse response. I'm assuming the pop is from some sort of static discharge somewhere along the signal path. That could very well not be the case, but that's as close as I'm going to get to sending an impulse through the Apollo 11 communication system. That gives me the flavor of transmitting my guitar from the moon, but obviously it's not going to be as rich as the real deal. I'm sure there's all sorts of distortions and nonlinearities in that signal path, and an impulse response isn't going to capture any of that. I think it serves its purpose well enough, though. So, after that, we get some bass that's generated by a physical modeling synth. The concept of a physical modeling synth is pretty cool, and actually, Logic Pro comes with a free one. The idea behind physical modeling synths is to simulate the sound of an instrument by using its physics equations. They tend to be good at simulating plucked strings and mallet instruments. That might sound like just another route to get the same sounds any other synth could give you, but actually it lets you do some pretty unique things. Like, you can use any other audio signal to excite your resonator. For example, in this song, I literally use a pick on my microphone to get a picking sound. The picking sound doesn't just trigger the synth to play a note. This plugin actually inputs your sound into its physics equations. So it's more like forcing your virtual string to wiggle in the same way your audio input does. That means if your audio input has a particular frequency within it, let's say 440 Hertz, you're actually going to be sending that frequency into your virtual string. What note your string wants to resonate at is just determined by your MIDI input, but it's also constantly interacting with whatever signal you put into it. Here, I just keep it simple with a plucking sound, but near the end of the song, I put my vocals through it. Okay, so the next sound we hear is from the drums. The kick, snare, and toms are all made the same way. I just swing my electromagnetic microphone over a magnet. And then the difference between the kick, snare, and tom sound is just due to how I process it in Logic Pro. The hi-hat is just me clipping a section of electromagnetic noise from my computer. And the vocals are just regular vocals, but layered with some vocoder.
Let's kick it and whittle, so it don't mean a thing. I got too many afternoons.
It's pretty far in the background during this part, but I also have a granular synth providing background chords. Granular synthesis is a super cool concept, and actually, Logic Pro comes with a free one of those too. Sometimes I feel like I'm just making a really long Logic Pro ad with these videos, but I have to hand it to them, they really knocked it out of the park. But I swear to God, if Logic ever moves to a subscription service, I'm out. This album took 7 years to make, which means if I paid $12 per month for Logic, I would have given Apple $1,000 just to mix one album. I'm sure Apple has at least thought about it, but come on, Apple. Haven't you made enough money from musicians? Well, maybe this subscription trend will be the push we need to actually make open source products comparable to the professional products. I think we're actually getting pretty close with a lot of them. But if Apple keeps charging a flat $200 for such a great DAW, I'll probably just buy the new version. Anyway, I was talking about granular synthesis. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. You just load in a sound, and then you choose a tiny region within that audio file to repeat over and over. You can get fancy with it, but that's the basic concept. The cool thing about granular synthesis is that you can steal the frequency profile from whatever audio input you want. For this song, I wanted the background chords to have the texture of a really old recording, so I just put in an old recording from the early 1900s. Not only that, you can get expressive with the granular synth too, by changing the section of the audio clip that's sampled as you play. I do that a couple times in this song. Here's just one example. So, going back to the first verse, I also pop in with a granular synth, which is sampling a tiny section of an old recording of a man singing. Then I hit a slinky to get that Star Wars blaster effect. And that's how the first verse ends. All the instruments die out, and I deliver the tagline of the song through MIDI. You might have seen a video on YouTube of Mark Rober using a talking piano. What I'm doing here is essentially the same thing, but instead of outputting a piano sound, I'm outputting sine waves. I thought that might make the words a little more clear and sound a little more sci-fi. I'm actually not sure how these audio to MIDI converters work, but I suspect they measure the frequencies of your audio using maybe a wavelet transform and just convert that to MIDI notes played at the right time. When you measure what frequencies comprise a signal, you're actually measuring the presence of sine waves, not square waves or triangle waves or whatever waveform a piano makes. Sine waves are special. You can think of a sine wave as the fundamental building block of a signal because you can't break a sine wave down any further. But you can build any other waveform just from sine waves, which is actually pretty mind-blowing, but I'll explain that later. I only bring that up because I suspect these audio to MIDI converters are using some common frequency measurement algorithm like the Fourier transform, or more likely something like a wavelet transform. Either way, it's breaking your signal into sine waves and then converting it to MIDI. I figure if I want to rebuild my signal with MIDI, I should probably use sine waves because that's probably how the signal was broken apart in the first place. Using a piano will introduce all these other frequencies that aren't part of the original signal. I might be getting too in the weeds here. Anyway, after the tagline, I bring back the intro riff with more energy. After that, we enter the second verse with two new instruments. The first one is this plasma pedal. I actually don't know how this works. I mean, I know it turns my guitar signal into plasma, but I don't really know what's going on with the signal. My Frank Hertz pedal also converts my guitar signal into plasma, but it sounds very different. I sort of suspect the plasma pedal is just a musical Tesla coil inside a tube full of xenon gas. I mean, that's rad, I don't mean to sound dismissive. In terms of signal processing, I actually wonder if it's doing something similar to what we discussed earlier, recording on the tape without an AC bias. Like, maybe the xenon tube doesn't pass your guitar signal through unless an ionization energy threshold is crossed. I'm just speculating. Anyway, it sounds cool when you crank it, but I like the sound a lot more when you starve it. Some parts kind of sound like they're reversed, but I was just playing my guitar normally and this is what it sounded like. The other instrument that comes in during this part is one I'm pretty excited about. It's this instrument called the Glissotar, which was the winner of the 2018 Guthman competition. That's the biggest musical instrument creation competition in the world. It's really cool, especially if you like new instruments, which I assume you do if you're watching this. But anyway, I was actually able to get in touch with the creator of the Glissotar, Daniel Vaxi, and I commissioned him to play a solo. In the second verse, the Glissotar is just doing backup. I'll talk more about this instrument when the solo comes along. So we have all that going on, and the second chorus ends, and this time I convert a harmony into MIDI to sing the tagline. Then I drop the energy in preparation to build up to the finale. Here I'm playing some sine waves through my interferometer, but in a more subdued way than I did before. Actually, to be honest, this part is using a simulation of my interferometer, which I converted into this plugin. It's a faster workflow to use plugins, and actually the math behind the simulation is so easy it's kind of embarrassing. The concept of the interferometer is pretty mind-bending, though. It just has easy math. Anyway, I don't think I set up my plugin correctly, because whenever I automate the overtones, I get this clicking sound. I think I just didn't set up an audio buffer correctly or something like that. But this is art, so bad is good, and I kept the clicking sounds in there. Then I ran this audio plugin through an old radio from the 50s and put it at the bottom of a stairwell to give the sound a sense of space. Then the Glissotar finally comes in for a solo. The Glissotar is played kind of like a flute, but with a reed mouthpiece, I think. Also, instead of having a bunch of little holes like a flute would, it has one big hole along the center, which is covered by a magnetic strip. Whenever you cover up holes on a flute, you're effectively changing the length of a pipe, and pipes of different lengths have different resonant frequencies. You just have to make sure the holes are in the right place to make the frequencies that you want. When you play the Glissotar, the magnetic strip will close the pipe up to the point where you contact it with your finger. But doing it that way means you can slide around between notes, which isn't possible with a regular flute. I should probably be comparing it to a saxophone, though, because that's closer to what it sounds like. But a saxophone can't make this alien sound. This sound comes from plucking the magnetic strip while you play it. It's like a turkey if a turkey knew how to sing well. But seriously, it does sound really cool. So thanks to Daniel Vaxi for making it and playing the solo. It's awesome. I'll definitely make an isolated track for this one if you want to hear the whole solo by itself. So next, I contrast Daniel's beautiful playing with AI's sad attempt at generating a bongo sound. Then as the solo picks up, I add in a bunch of little sounds from this and that and whatever was in my studio at the time. One detail that probably isn't super interesting, but I really like for some reason, is this. This is me doing some tom sounds with my mouth and running it through the plugin that turns everything into sine waves. Like literally just going doo doo doo. So the solo ends and I bring in some synth played by Mushrooms, which is courtesy of Michael Lyko. Then I run every instrument through my crappy little talkbox and mouth out the tagline of the song. From here on out, the song just winds down using some familiar sounds. At the very last chord, I requested that AI finish the song for me. There's this AI program called Jukebox that you feed some music into, and it does its best to continue it. Maybe it's improved since I used it, but I remember even its golden examples sounded pretty wonky. I mean, I gave it the last couple bars of my song, and here's what it came up with. Assuming it spat out music, the plan was to then feed it its own output and then do that over and over until it was just mush. But honestly, it just gave me mush on the first go-round, so I guess that's fine too. And that's it. If you'd like to hear this song without me interrupting it, I'll put a link in the description. Oh, one more thing, I guess. The narration you hear at the end is some audio I found on this old tape from the 60s that I got from eBay. I just wanted to use the tape player, but it was kind of a nice surprise to find there was already some recordings on it. I took a while to just listen to it, and I don't know how to describe it. It felt kind of strange. Like, this is just some guy in California from the 60s talking about his family and playing guitar and recording music from the radio, just living his life. It kind of felt like I was eavesdropping in on a totally normal person, but like 60 years ago. I'm used to hearing old performances, but there was something kind of surreal about listening to a totally normal person just talk about their life in a time that's essentially unrecognizable from the world we live in now. I wonder if that's how it feels to be an archaeologist. Anyway, He said some things that actually happen to tie in pretty well with the themes of the album, so I put him in. He sounds like a sweet guy.
And although there have been times when I haven't felt well, I nevertheless am extremely happy to be here with you.